Cool. So, hi everyone, and welcome to Eyes on the Future, the live Q&A sesh. I'm Sophia, a second-year creative writer, and I'll be one of your hosts. And then this is Catherine.
I'm your other host. I'm a second-year just English Lit student, and I'm your other host for this event.
Cool. Today's event will be a chance to hear about different areas of work within literature and media. And we'll be hearing from our fabulous and ever so talented guest speakers, such as Craig Jordan Baker, Adam Waters, Desiree Reynolds, Caraline Brown, and of course, Sean Campbell. So, yeah, let's begin. So, we have Craig Jordan Baker, who is a writer and a senior lecturer in creative writing, and the writer of the newest Epoch Press novel, The Napoleons, I think it is. Yeah. So.
Okay, I'll add Craig on
to the. Add him in.
Wow, brilliant. Hi, Craig.
Great. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Can you see me okay?
Yes, you're all good.
Oh, great. Thanks very much for inviting me to this. It was nice to be seeing that apparently there was some straw poll of people you'd like to hear from, and I was among some of the top people there, so I'm really grateful for that. I know you're going to be talking to a lot of people today that will give you, I'm sure, a lot of hot takes on a lot of different things, and will be very practical. What I want to talk about is a little bit about my own experience, and about maybe more of the psychological aspects of thinking about the future and thinking about our kind of how we go forward. So I've written a little piece, and it's called "The Poetic Bum: A Brief Guide to Being Interesting in the 21st Century." So when I was a teenager, I told my mum that I would end up being nothing more than a poetic bum. She would look at me with a curious side glance, and probably nodded one of her "we'll see about that" nods, which she often did. But for me, being a poetic bum is a figure that captures and still captures a lot of how I try to go about things. So let me kind of put that into a bit of context for you. So in the preface to his collected works, the poet Patrick Kavanagh said this about navigating the vagaries of life, and I quote, "I lost my messianic compulsion. I sat on the banks of the Grand Canal in the summer of 1955 and let the water lap idly on the shores of my mind. My purpose in life was to have no purpose." Now, there are two things I think to pick up on here about what Cavan is saying. The first is messianic compulsion. That's a desire to be on a mission to convert, to save, to proclaim a truth that everyone might hear. Kavanagh refuses to make his life one kind of gilded by the certainty of a singular purpose. And the second concerns having, quote unquote, no purpose in life. And these two things are the essence for me of being the poetic bum. Now, being a poetic bum doesn't actually mean you have to be a poet. And being a bum doesn't have to mean you're itinerant, homeless, or jobless, or even poor. To be a bum is for your life not to be principally aimed at certain kinds of conventional success. At least that's how I understand it. And by that, I mean things like money, popularity, a prestigious job, fame, personal attractiveness and glamour, and so on. And this version of success is something we see in a lot of fictional characters, actually, from, Beowulf to Madame Bovary, and probably Donald Trump as well. And whether we accept or reject that idea of success, we recognize its existence, and I think we're all to some extent influenced by it and swayed by it. But it's a version of success that keeps us wanting and keeps driving us forward. And in that regard, it has got real power, and it's got some uses. But it also means, I think, that for a lot of us, we will, against those standards, fail to some significant degree. And importantly, for someone who values only that kind of success, a life without those kinds of success can seem to be a life, quote unquote, without purpose, as Kavanagh talks about. So if being a bum is akin to avoiding the fate of failing against these unlikely standards, what about being poetic? Okay, so I think being poetic is, if it doesn't sound too grandiose, is an openness to joy. What do I mean by that? Well, it seems obvious that people desire joy, and of course, you know, we would choose joy, and so it seems pretty obvious that we're all open to joy, apparently. But I think the key word here is the term openness, because I don't think we're necessarily all open to joy. So let me explain a little bit about that. So many of us are not open to expanding the range and the depth of the things that bring us joy. Someone who decides that getting drunk isn't enough and they want to actually enjoy what they're drinking, I think, is being poetic. Someone that's willing to learn the names of the trees upon their street, or develop a taste for a new kind of music, they're also being poetic. And what is deepening and expanding this engagement presupposes for you as an individual is, I think, quite broad. So I think being poetic says something about the person that you are. Firstly, I think it suggests a certain kind of modesty. So, you know, the idea is there are joys in the world, and I have a little that I have not very much knowledge of, but nevertheless, they are worthwhile. Though I may never learn Russian or care about real ale, I do, in fact, care a lot about real ale. The second is confidence, the idea that I'm not bound to my current joys, and I possess the dynamism and that confidence to engage in more of the world and to obtain for myself some of its joy and richness. Now, you might begin to think something a little like this at this stage in this talk. I see, this is the pep talk that he's going for. That's very nice of you, Craig, but my life is shite at the moment and you can't understand anything about it, so thank you very much, but no thank you. Now, if that is you, then I'd ask you to bear with me, because I believe that being a poetic bum is a great defense against the contingency and disasters that life can bring. And to kind of illustrate that, I want to talk a little bit about my own experience. And I'll take a glug of tea before I do that. So in 2016, my mother had a triple stroke and became unable to care for one of my younger sisters who has learning disabilities. Me and my partner took on full-time care of this sister. We moved her to Brighton. We set up her education, her benefits, her routine, her social life. We planned her future. During this time, I'll be travelling back to my hometown of Southampton for long weekends to support my mother and my youngest sister. My mother had to learn to walk and to read again, among other things. My youngest sister, understandably, was petrified of losing her mother. I also knew that I needed a job in Brighton, where I lived, and so I could make caring for my other sister that much easier. So I took on a second job at the University of Brighton. So I had a frail mother, 2 academic jobs, full-time caring for a disabled adult. At times, the strain did seem nearly overwhelming. But things did ease. I got a permanent job at Brighton, and a long-term caring arrangement was found for my sister, and so things got much better. But then in 2018, late in 2018, my mother was diagnosed for the 3rd time with cancer. And we all knew early on that it would be fatal. And as a result of this, my youngest sister suffered terrible mental distress. And again, myself and my partner had to step in. And this time we had to become not just carers, but parents for a sister who was losing her mother. Again, we set up a life for a young person who was having the most difficult time of their life. Added to this, my mother's angiosarcoma, that's the name of the cancer. It was a very visible form of cancer and caused her a lot of embarrassment, a lot of pain and distress. And every weekend I would travel back to Southampton. I'll provide care and company at her home, at the care home, in hospital, wherever she was. And indeed, due to her cancerous tumours, she also became blind. And then in July 2019, she was near death. I would spend nights on the floor of her room. And I won't sink into what I experienced there. But at various points during this whole time, the strain was nearly overwhelming. And then we've got 2020. Needless to say, the pandemic's brought challenges we are all familiar with and that need no rehearsal from me. But we all know that at times this strain for all of us has been nearly or in fact overwhelming. And it's against this backdrop that being a poetic bum has saved me from being overwhelmed, firstly by defending me against expectations that I can't meet up to or live up to, and also being open to joy, as I said before. So during these difficult years, for example, I did a lot of things to try and expand and deepen my ability to engage, have joy, have enjoyment. I learned to brew beer. I wrote a novel. I learned to play the bodhrán, and I joined a local folk session at a local pub. Much to the disgust and embarrassment of my younger self, I became a Morris dancer. And then when the pandemic made gathering with others impossible, I learned to play the banjo. I began to run. I learned to whittle really, really badly. I'm a very bad whittler. I never stopped reading. And I also learned the jangled joys of parenthood by helping to raise my sister, even though myself and my partner never wanted children. And at the moment, I'm teaching myself to read music. So since 2016, I've doubtless missed out on many opportunities and many chances for conventional success. And I'm doubtless, I'd look a lot more beautiful if I hadn't been under such consistent strain. But it's been a relief to me to have such things feature low in my list of priorities. I'm a bum after all. And being a poetic bum, I managed to keep some level of joy in my life, and along with it, the confidence and modesty to only be nearly overwhelmed. Now, it's a cliche of the 21st century that things are, at least in the West, difficult for younger generations. We think about job security. We think about housing, the climate, public services, and now, of course, the pandemic. And it's impossible not to notice that the horizon of expectations for young people has just radically altered in, say, the last 50 years. It's also a 21st century cliche that never before in human history have so many had so much access to knowledge, the passions and the skills of members of their fellow species. If you want to make music, learn a new language, engage with visual arts, darn your old socks, or share your enthusiasm for RPG tabletop games of the 1990s, the possibilities have never been so broad. It's at this point in history that I think it seems particularly ripe for the poetic bum, someone who's not driven by a single messianic compulsion, but is girded with the modesty and dynamism to be interesting. And I think what's crucial there is that, first of all, we need to be interesting to ourselves, mostly. Thanks. That was my little contribution to this event.
That was fantastic, Craig. Thank you so much.
Yes, bravo.
That was really, really interesting. Thank you for starting off the event. I know that is a hard role to have to take.
Yes,
As speaker, throw you in right at the deep end.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I hope it was okay.
It was fantastic.
Good.
We have a couple of questions for you. Personally, yes. Sophia, I think that's on to you.
Yeah. So during the lockdown and everything, and being a poetic bum, how did you get through like writer's block and everything? So like when you were in lockdown with struggling with inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I would say I was probably but it's about keeping the avenues open. It's like, let's say if you're a kind of a marathon runner and you get injured, you still want to keep up some level of activity so you can return to that place. So I think there's been a lot of talk about being kind to yourself and being easy with yourself and forgiving yourself. So I would say that some of that list of some of the things I've done, they were there to keep the avenues open. I didn't necessarily whittle because I want to become some professional whittler. I just wanted to keep experiencing new things and trying out new skills and being open. Sometimes I didn't have the energy to do everything that I wanted to, but I certainly did have, and I finished my novel before the pandemic started, but it was still during some difficult times. So I would say doing things that just keep the possibilities open rather than forcing yourself to, write 500 words a day or so on. I think that can also be a recipe for sometimes disaster. If so whittle. If you can't write, whittle.
Fair enough.
We've got some questions coming in.
Sorry, Catherine.
Sorry. We've got some questions coming in. Jake Hurst has asked if there is any poetic bums from fiction or real life that you look up to.
My favourite poetic bum in the world is David Lister from the series Red Dwarf, who's so it's a 1980s, 1990s BBC science fiction sitcom. And when I was growing up, there's a character there who is a sort of a technician third class on this spaceship who doesn't really care about his job, but he's a really sensitive, interesting, smart, working class guy, and who's always much more likable than the technician first class, who is this preppy, a very annoying middle class guy called Rimmer, which gives you a clue to his character. So I would certainly say, actually, as a child, David Lister was a big influence in terms of representing the poetic bum, but also people like, I suppose, people like James Joyce, the idea of just hanging around in Parisian cafes and not being sort of getting by, certainly make a difference. But I would say Dave Lister was probably my childhood poetic bum model.
Nice. I hadn't heard of him. That was interesting to hear. Robin asks if you've got any tips for any aspiring poetic bums that might be watching today.
Yeah, and I think you can't stop some things from happening, but I would say one of the best ways you can defend yourself from contingencies is by always, even if it's very modest, always engaging in something new and expanding your capacity to have enjoyment. When I couldn't dance with a group anymore, I started doing something else. And I might never be the best at anything, but again, my version of success isn't about being the best. It's about constantly engaging and constantly enjoying, finding new things to enjoy in something. So I would always say, in a sense, you don't have to aspire to be a bum. That's the great thing about it. You just have to be interested and interesting, and a lot of benefits come along with that. So you don't even need this concept, particularly of aspiration as such. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about it as well.
We've got another question just come in from Harrison, who has asked, hi Craig, how do you think creativity is shaped by stresses such as the pandemic?
I think in a lot of ways, thanks for that question, really, really important. In a lot of ways, it's obviously closed down. And I think it would be naive for anyone to pretend that people are going to could be expected to have great flights of fancy and real release. Some people will, and some people will have very enviable stories about, oh, I was furloughed and so I wrote my 5-part novel. Well, brilliant for them. Absolutely. That's not me. So it certainly affected it negatively, but I think also, if you're this perspective of being a poetic individual, someone that's always on the lookout for things that you can do, which are within your budget, your context, and so on, and nearly always there's something that you can do, even if it's just whittling. Again, I would say that it has had a negative effect, and it's not surprising that it has had a negative effect, I would say, broadly speaking, but it certainly hasn't killed the human capacity for joy, and I don't think anything will.
Oh, that was a beautiful, thank you. Those are some really fantastic answers. Sophia, do you have any other questions?
I guess one would be, what led you on to like writing about the Nicolians?
So, well, they always say that people's first novel is often the most autobiographical, and in some regards that's the case. So it's about 3 generations of a Anglo-Irish working class family in Southampton, and lo and behold, my background does have certain similarities to that. But it was also it's also about actually the 21st century. It's a book because it's a book really about the 20th century and that transition. And now there are people living and that are adults that don't have didn't know the 20th century at all. And so I think it's a really ripe time to kind of like reflect and talk about, well, what was the 20th century now that we're out of it? Now we really are gone. And how does that help us define what the 21st century is? And so I think I'm in a particular position where I have quite a lot of, I don't have any of my adult life, but my whole childhood was spent in the 20th century. And then my whole adulthood has been the 21st. And so I think that's one of the kind of key things I'm interested in there, and about how our expectations change, or potentially change. And indeed, how violence was much more physical in the 20th century. Now some of it's moved online. People had good proper riots in the street in the 20th century. Nice, honest, no passive aggressiveness, no anonymity. You knew it was Barry Jenkins chucking that brick at you, and there was a comfort in that.
Yep.
Fair enough. Alessandra has just asked, do you ever feel that there is not enough time to really savor each moment when overwhelmed by the things that you have to do?
Yes, but I think it might be. I would always say, well, think about this idea of savoring each moment. If you say I don't have to savor each moment, sometimes I just need to wipe my baby's bum. Sometimes I need to go shopping for beans. And you say, look, I shouldn't expect to really savor those moments. But I think maybe what Alessandra you're asking is that is there some time to savor something? Is there 15 minutes to whittle with? Is there time to sit down and even get through 5 pages of that book you really, really want to pay attention to? Keeping in contact with the capacity and experience of joy and that expanding, I think is the key thing. I think you can sometimes put yourself under too much pressure to say that you need to savor it every moment, because we can't do that. And indeed, babies' bums need to be wiped and beans need to be bought. So, those are really important things too.
I love how that's where you first went, the beans.
Which you read the Nicolians, it's there's the similar kind of scope of kind of examples there.
Right. Any other questions?
Oh, yes, we've got one more from Space Ace. Says, fantastic talk, Craig. Did COVID-19 strongly alter your experience getting your new novel published? From B.
Thank you, Space Ace. It didn't. It was published. Well, actually, no, it did. It was meant to be initially published in May 2020. That was then delayed. I was going to have a launch in Waterstones, proper place, all that kind of stuff, and it was delayed. And then we ended up publishing in September, and it was published. And the launch party was at the top of a local pub, so a very different environment from Waterstones. So it did really change that, and also. It also in the month of September 2020, I think it set a record for the most books published in 1 month, because so many books have been delayed. So you entered a well, you can clap as well, but it's awful. You enter a market where everyone else's novel is also coming out, and so it becomes very, very difficult to actually, especially if you're an independent if you're published by an independent press, you've got a small marketing budget, and you have to market in really smart ways, or kind of so that what has been really, really significant and difficult. So if you are publishing, thinking about where in the cycle you're publishing has been quite important. So I kind of published at the worst time possible in recent human history.
Oh my God, that does not make your life any easier.
But it was still a lovely event.
Good. I'm glad you had a good time. Thank you so much for talking to us, Craig, and for answering all those questions.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great time. See you later.
You You too. Goodbye, Craig.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Wow, that was really interesting. I really liked that. So we're next going to be hearing from Adam Waters, who I've just noticed has just popped up. So that's good timing. Adam is a Brighton alumni, first of all, and is going to be talking to us about how to break into the creative industries, which, you know, I'm sure we all know is a very difficult thing to do. So it's going to be nice to hear from somebody who knows how to do it, you know, what we should be expecting. He's on the senior management team at the British Forces Broadcasting Service. So I'm hoping this will be a really interesting presentation. Adam, I'm just going to add you onto the stream now. Hello.
Hi, very nice of you, and hi everyone else.
Hi.
All right, so you've got your 30 minutes to do your presentation. So I'll put you onto the stream so that we're just having to look at your face, not me.
What a treat. Thank you.
Go right ahead. Thank you, Adam.
So welcome everyone, and as mentioned, my name's Adam and I work at BFBS, where I run two businesses, a creative agency business and a training business to build up people's comm skills. And what we're all about is tangibly changing people's lives and creating jobs for them through creativity. So it's wonderful work. It's so nice to have that impact on the world. I've also got a book out about digital content, which I'll tell you about. And I remember sitting where you are about 15 years ago, and I knew I wanted a creative career, but I had no idea what. The creative industries seemed like this vague, faraway place. I knew I wanted to break into it, but I didn't know how. And actually, I remember being really jealous of all my housemates who were studying pharmacy, believe it or not, because they had an exact plan to follow. And I remember thinking, I wish someone would just tell me, Adam, this is how you break into the creative industries, and this is what you should do. But I didn't know anyone in the creative industries, and I had to support my family, and it felt really hard. And it was quite demoralizing, actually. So I thought this time slot maybe would be best used if I could kind of literally explained how I got to where I am today, and then of course answered any questions you've got about getting into those creative industries. Let's get you into work, shall we? So I had this sense that, you know, I wanted to do something creative, but I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and in fact I still don't. And so I spent a lot of my time in my third year basically trying everything, but I never thought of myself as a creative person, in that I couldn't sing, I couldn't paint or act or play instruments. You know, you meet some people who are just naturally creative, and I'd never really been specifically good at anything. I just wanted to be in the creative industries because it interested me. So I pirated some video editing software, and I taught myself to stitch videos together. I started playing around with Photoshop, and I made up some pretty terrible excuses to borrow camera kit from the uni, actually. And I decided to take on a creative writing and journalism module. So, but I was just trying stuff, and none of it was very good, but I was just practicing. And then halfway through my third year, and I don't know if some of you will have been able to do this, I had an opportunity to make a short film. And this was going to be my big moment, my magnum opus. And I became really fixated on this idea for my story, that what if there was a man driving one night and he came across a road traffic accident and rushed over, finds someone by the road and looks into their eyes and realizes that that person is their soulmate before they promptly cark it. And he then can't ever forget them. And I thought, this is such a compelling, brilliant idea. And I knew with this that everyone would be wowed by my artistic genius, and everyone on my course would either want to be me or to sleep with me. The tutors would fawn over me, and I'd get a phone call from, you know, Christopher Nolan or something. And I thought, well, just submitting it to the tutors wouldn't be any good. The world needs to see this masterpiece. So I put on a student film night where I gamely offered to show everyone else's film, but crucially give mine the prime slot without telling anyone. And the big night came, the room was packed, and I sat near the front, ready to turn around and bow to everyone once the applause had subsided. And that moment came where it's time to play my film. The title sequence began, the opening scenes played. And it was at that point that I realized my film was absolutely terrible. I hadn't actually cast any proper actors. I just used my mates, and I'm colorblind, and I didn't actually think to get someone to check the film. So what I thought was a very unique stylized look actually gave everything a strange blue color. And someone told me afterwards they thought I'd set it on another planet or something. And I also forgot to explain that the man had fallen in love with the person by the roadside. So all that everyone saw was just someone appearing to run somebody over and then think about it a lot, which isn't very compelling or groundbreaking, is it? And the film ended and it was just silence. There were a few awkward claps, but my big moment was pretty ruined. And I have to admit, I spent a few days in a complete pit of despair, humiliation. But two things happened after that. There was a member of the breakdancing society, and they mentioned that they needed someone to make some promo videos for them. And that was easily the most stylish thing I've ever worked on. And also one of the tutors, I think Ross, I don't know if he's still there, mentioned that a local theatre company were putting on a play in a nearby village, an abandoned village, and they needed someone who could shoot and edit to make short looping films to be projected onto the side of buildings. And that was mind-boggling, because to see my work beamed onto the side of a barn and hundreds of people seeing it, I thought, actually, I can do this. And if I hadn't put myself out there and failed miserably, I wouldn't have ever gone on to do it. Just by trying something, it worked. So I did a few sort of creative bits and pieces. I tried to make, video wherever I could. And actually, I ended up getting a job interview for a video editor at a production company in North London. I grew up just outside of London. It always seemed very grown up and far away and glamorous. And I walked up the stairs in this production company that had gold painted walls, and they were all covered in these bizarre artworks. And I felt absolutely terrified. And just before the interview, I thought I'd better do all I can to increase the odds of me getting the role. So I surprised them by bringing along a video I'd made using their branding. I dug around online as much as I could and tried to learn the history of the place. And the fact that I could take that example video and the breakdancing video, it impressed them, and they offered me the job. But that's despite me saying to the interviewer, it sounds like the only bad thing about working here is having to put up with all these terrible paintings. And it turned out he'd painted them. So I managed to claw it back from that. So there I learned to I had the video editing skills, but I started to learn how to structure programs and short form news packages, learn how the market works, what is the market for video content. And a guy started working there who was quite a big name from TV production. And I thought, I better make friends with this guy. He's really experienced. I can learn from him. So at every work drink session, I'd make sure to have a chat on him and just be really straight up and say, what career advice do you have for me? And he went on to work for a TV channel called Bloomberg Television, part of Bloomberg. And he called me up and said, we need someone to run our video production desk. Can you come and do it? Because he knew I was hungry to get ahead in my career, and he knew I could put together video. And now that gold painted production company, which seemed so intimidating a few years before, suddenly seemed very run down compared to Bloomberg. The headquarters were in this giant glass cube stuffed with free meals and these incredibly intelligent people. And they even had in-house doctors to help you stop getting poorly. It's one of the biggest data and news organizations in the world. And I frankly felt like a total fraud turning up. How have I made this here? How have I ended up here? But because I learned to put together video pieces, they gave me a lot of trust and responsibility to pull together new kinds of business. And it turned out I had a bit of a knack for spotting, you know, kind of good stories that would get a lot of views and that were really popular. So they gave me more and more people to look after. I was working with some really brilliant people, but it's a global organization and it's long hours, and it took, you know, it started to take its toll. And I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I saw a role come up at BFBS, and I'd never heard of BFBS. It was a charity, an independent organization, the Forces Broadcasting Service, and they needed a head of digital, someone who understood how social media worked, how to pull together a video team. So I handed in my notice at Bloomberg, and the phone rang, and it was one of the top people in New York, and he said, "I want you to come and work for me in New York." And he did this all in a fake Cockney accent because he thought, as a British person, I'd really love that. It didn't go down very well, and the world seemed to pause. I had this choice: do I go to New York, or do I take this role as this, you know, broadcaster I'd never heard of? But I thought, you know, I'm not enjoying my work at the moment, so why would doing it in New York be any different? And also, I've always thought New York was pretty overrated, but everyone was kind of saying to me, you know, you're mad, you've got to go there. But it just didn't feel right for me. And I think that was really important, because there isn't a set journey. You know, you have to pick what is right for you and what feels right for you. And then where I find myself at BFBS, you know, I'm being able to have this really positive impact on the world, create jobs for people, creative jobs, do work to counter extremism, which is so rewarding and promising, that I'm so glad I did make that decision. I mentioned at the start that I had a book out, and that took a lot of rejection. I was at a networking event, and I was talking to somebody, and she said, "Oh, I work as a commissioning editor for this book publisher." And it just went into my head. It just pinged into my head. I want to publish a book. And I said to her, "Oh, can I pitch to you?" And she said yes. And we got pretty far, and it got rejected. So I said, "Oh, okay, well, can I pitch a different kind of book?" Sure. That got rejected. So then I thought, okay, are there any other publishers you can introduce me to? And it was on that third try that I finally got the note to publish that book. So that took a fair bit of doing. And I think, you know, I could never have planned or known that I would end up working with you know, the armed forces and charities by understanding digital media. I could never have known that my production skills and chatting to that guy would have led to a phone call from Bloomberg, that putting together a video for a job interview would get me into a production company, or that showing my terrible film at a student film night would lead to my work being beamed onto the side of a barn. I could never have planned that. I could never have told you that's what path my career is going to take. So I've come to believe that plans are a waste of time. You can't know that the exciting and difficult and scary and thrilling opportunities life will send your way. But you do have to get out there. And sometimes that can be hard if you're somebody who doesn't have much confidence, or who has suffered from mental health problems, or who doesn't know exactly where to place themselves, or even know what their skills are and what they can offer. You know, that can be difficult. But you can make your own luck, and you can get a creative career and a creative role by just doing that. Be creative, use those powers in whatever way you can to get out there, to show people what you can do. And I absolutely promise you this, that if you just try doing something creative, anything that feels like you're broadly going in the right direction, could be writing, it could be experimenting with a video, it could be putting on an event, it could be championing a cause you really care about, but basically do something that feels roughly like the sort of thing you want to be doing. And if you do that and you keep doing it, a fulfilling, exciting and creative life can absolutely be yours. And that's it from me. So I'm very happy to answer any questions or offer any advice if people are available. Oh, good to see you again, Sophia and Catherine.
Thank you for that, by the way. That was such it was really inspiring, actually, to think that you can make your own luck just by being this creative, like looking for a creative outlook, or yeah.
Well, I think not to start on a more negative note, but the truth is no one will come along to you and say, here is your dream job, or here is that opportunity you've been seeking. You know, you do have to put yourself out there. And I think naturally I'm an introverted person, so I find networking agonizing. Like, it's just absolutely awful. But the more people you can meet and the more, you know, work you can put out there, you're kind of increasing the odds of somebody going, Sophia, I must give her a ring because she'll, you know, I've seen her stuff. She's good. Let's give her a chance. People are very willing to help, if you put yourself out there and share what you can do with the world. And I don't think I can post it, but there is a link available to that first breakdancing video I produced. And it is awful. It is so bad. But that's fine. But yeah, I'm glad. Yes, I just remember it feeling very nerve-wracking when I was in my third year. You know, how on earth do I break into the creative industries? It's impossible. But it's definitely not.
I was just wondering, just from what you briefly mentioned it, but that sort of feeling that you don't, almost like that imposter feeling of like, you know, you're in this big company and it can be, I imagine, incredibly overwhelming. Do you have any advice for, you know, if anybody watching this ends up with an amazing opportunity like that, how to overcome that feeling that you deserve to be there and that you should be there and that you are? Because I know that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is feeling like you aren't prepared to be where you are and that it's so tricky. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Of course, Catherine. And also there's a similar comment from Abby. How do you put yourself out there if you struggle with confidence? So I'll answer both in the same go. I feel very, very strongly about this because, so to start with, like, it sounds like a criticism of Brighton. I messed up all my exams. I was never any good at anything at school. You know, I was never like, oh, he's really academic or really sporty or whatever. I was like, who am I? And I could never identify what is it I'm actually good at. And then, like I said, there were these annoyingly creative people who could produce amazing music and could paint. And I hated them because it was they were creative, and it's like, well, what am I? You know, I didn't know, what am I? And for about 20 years, I would say I've overcome it, but for 20 years I had depression, rather very badly, and so yes, it was feeling like, I can't break into that industry. It seems so far away, but I really want to because I don't want a boring job. So that was quite miserable, to be honest. And then, yes, some of you may have heard this phrase, imposter syndrome. You know, I don't deserve this job. I don't have any skills. I'm blagging it. Everyone else seems to have everything swept up and I'm chancing my way through life. And let me tell you this, that we train some very senior people and some very experienced people who are very bright and very intelligent. And at the start of every single session I say, have you ever felt, I'll put my hand up and I'll admit it. Have you ever put your hand up and have felt like you can't make it, you're going to fail, you're an imposter, you are blagging your way through life, everyone else seems to have it swept up, and I've yet to have a single person keep their hand down. Now, I don't want that to sound depressing, as if it will never feel any better. But once you realize that actually for everybody, it is normal, and you will go through periods where you think, I don't know how to figure this out. I don't know how to get out there. That doesn't mean you can't. And I think that's the most important thing. And it takes a lot of work. It's easy for me to say that. But that voice in your head doesn't actually mean it's true just because it's in your head. And you do have to be, I don't know what the right word is, firm with yourself or brave with yourself to say, you know what, despite feeling afraid, I'm going to do it anyway. And I think that's bravery. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It's deciding to do it anyway. To be a bit more specific to Abby, good ways to put yourself out there. Well, I've actually, I know conferences might seem a crazy thought, but at any social event, conferences or a creative night or whatever it was, you can always tell who the introverts are because they hang around outside the wall. You know, the extroverts are in the middle, hanging out and chatting to each other, and the introverts are all doing this. They're looking at their phones and like desperately hoping no one talks to them. And I found a huge success rate with just going up to them and saying, I really hate socializing. I find these really awkward. Do you as well? And actually that worked a treat. And you can just moan about how annoying the extroverts are and all of this. You know, building up your confidence is something that takes time and is a bit of a habit. And I think knowing and accepting you will fail. I have failed many, many, many times. And it is when you fail that you learn. And because you fail, it doesn't mean you're a failure, if that makes sense. I've got some other comments actually. I don't know if should I just motor on and answer them. I don't want to.
Yes,
no, go for it.
I'll read them out just for the sake of anybody watching this later on. But let's look. Alessandra has asked,
yes.
Very good advice, Adam. Sometimes we get sidetracked making plans instead of investing and getting our creativity out there. Do you feel that networking in a world after COVID has been made more difficult?
Well, yes. I mean, yes, of course. And yeah, it's been rather tricky at work because myself included, although I'm an introvert, I do like going out and meeting people. And I thought at the start of it that I wouldn't mind being sat in this study, but I'm very tired of this room, I have to admit. Networking has been made more difficult. But then on the other hand, I would say that there's a lot of people who know how hard it is for students who have been stuck inside throughout their studies, and I would say are very willing to help. So using LinkedIn is really good. Ask people for advice, look up the companies you would be interested in working for or the sorts of roles. And I think it's quite remarkable how willing people are to help. And Alessandra also asked, you know, we get sidetracked making plans instead of investing in getting our creativity out there. Now, I think what's really important is that you are quite kind to yourselves. And I mean that in all sorts of ways. But no one is this fire hose of creativity. And if you're not constantly coming up with remarkable creative visions, you're somehow not a creative. And that's a lie, frankly. I'm probably creative 10% of the time, you know, and most people are actually. And I think it is hard to juggle everything. And after I left uni, you know, it did take me probably close to a year of doing temp jobs for the NHS to actually get a proper creative job. So don't beat yourself up if you're not all the time foot on the accelerator. I need to be creative all the time. And also your creative art will be terrible if you do that, frankly. But I think what is really important is to not give up. You know, it does take time and it can be painful, but I'm old enough that, you know, I've got a daughter now. And when I meet the other parents, some of them talk about their work to say they're really unhappy and they say, yeah, but, you know, it's a job, it pays the bills. And what a life. Why would you want to live your life that way? It is worth fighting for. But don't let setbacks, you know, make you give up. Don't give up. If you keep at it, you'll do it. Robin asks, was the company in New York, did they ever get in touch again? No, Bloomberg were not in touch again, because actually they have a policy. Once you leave, you're not allowed to work for them again, which is interesting.
Huh.
Lauren asks, do you have any advice you'd give to someone looking to improve their skill in photography or video? Two things, Lauren. One is YouTube is amazing. It is absolutely amazing in terms of the stuff you can learn. And also, I know this sounds really boring, but just do it. Just keep doing it. Use your phone, obviously. It's remarkably powerful. And I think the thing I notice a lot with video is that a lot of people love shooting really stunning, beautiful video, but they struggle to learn, or it takes time, I should say, to learn how to structure a piece and what is the narrative, if that makes sense. But ultimately, Lauren, the absolute best education you can have is just by doing it and by making tons of mistakes. I've got a question from Chris, but Catherine, Sophia, do you want to pitch in, or shall I just motor on?
I mean, you can keep going if you want.
Right, so Chris asks, where do you think the line is between authentic reinvention and affectation when expressing yourself creatively? Well, that's an interesting question. Certainly, and I really literally don't mean this in a trite way, you have to be true to yourself. So like I said, when I was at uni, I tried to be this this grand film director, and I wore incredibly pretentious clothing, even more pretentious glasses than these. And I thought that because that is what a creative person is, and that leads to trouble. You know, you have to be true to yourself, and generally people have a really good bullshit detector. And there are a lot of people in the creative industries who you meet them and you just think, well, you're a bullshitter, you're a tosser, you're just making this up, and you don't actually have any substance. You know, if people sort of fill out a paint by numbers, this is what a creative is, they fail actually rather quickly. You know, what is it that you want to express? Why is it that you care about this? And ultimately that is what is right, and that is what draws people to it. It is your vision, not sort of dressing up as this is what a creative person should be. But that self-image, that perspective of yourself will change over time and will grow and adapt, and that's wonderful. But don't feel like you have to play make-believe with what a creative is. Again, I'd never thought of myself as a creative person, and it took me a while to realize what it was that I was creative at, if that makes any sense. So I hope that answers you, Chris, Abby and Lauren. Got a bit more time if people have any other questions.
I have a question for you, actually. I was just wondering what your favorite part about working at BFBS was.
Well, it is, yes, because I'm still there.
Yes.
Well, it's because I mean, the fact that the work that we do, it creates jobs for people, meaningful work, creative jobs. And I don't know if any of you have heard of this Kickstart scheme, but it's people who are in long-term unemployment, and the government sort of supports you creating roles. You know, the fact that we're able to bring people in and give them really creative, meaningful work that's exciting and has purpose and a positive impact on the world. I mean, you couldn't really ask for anything better in my book. You know, what a wonderful life. You know, I get to be creative, make jobs for people and build a business. You know, it started out just me, and we're up to like 35 people now. Amazing, brilliant. I'm delighted. And we get to do really cool stuff. I mean, there's some stuff that I won't ever be, I'm definitely not telling you now, and I'll have to take to my grave because it's secret. But, you know, to make a real impact on the world is a thrilling and wonderful thing. And, but again, I could never have planned that. I could never have planned that.
Wow, that was a really interesting presentation, Alan. Thank you so much.
There you go. You're very welcome. If anyone has any further questions or concerns and they want some help or advice, I do recommend if you add me on LinkedIn, because it's good for you to be on LinkedIn anyway, so it sort of forces you to make a profile if you haven't got one already. But please do message me if I can be of any assistance.
Wow, thank you. I think we're all good for the questions now. Thank you so much for talking to us, Adam. That's been really interesting to hear your perspective on all of this and the industry side and everything.
No worries, my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Brilliant.
So are we running good for time?
We are running good for time, and we've got Desiree coming in a couple of minutes, hopefully, just waiting for her to pop onto the stream. While we're waiting, Sophie, do you want to introduce Dee?
Desiree Reynolds, the writer, editor, creative writing workshop facilitator, and freelance journalist. I mean, she does quite a lot, and she's so talented as well. And then she's the author of the much acclaimed Seduce, which is a good pretty good novel.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Brilliant. She isn't actually on the stream yet, so we're still waiting for her to jump on, I'm afraid. So I suppose, we can kill a couple minutes just sort of waiting on her. But I really liked Adam and Craig. I thought those were so interesting.
Yeah.
I thought those were such fantastic talks. I didn't expect that to be, what either of them were going to talk about from what I have met of Craig and what I've been reading about and Adam. Those were really, really interesting perspectives on the whole thing. Craig's idea of like the poetic bum was really cool, and it was a really different perspective, I thought, to get on everything.
Yeah, I mean, when Adam started, I was like, I don't know where this is going, and then he was talking about like just enjoying like what you do and like being like happy in your role. Like I feel like that's such an important thing to like emphasize on.
Totally. I can imagine it would have been quite difficult to go from a big massive company to a smaller one, for the BFBS. I can imagine that could have been a difficult changeover and feeling like it's a step in a different direction. But that is interesting, I think, to hear from both of them.
And to like be colorblind and then not realize till your like whole thing is just being shown.
I suppose that's just not something you think about until it's too late.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on, I'm just going to disappear for 1 second, and we're just going to send an email to Desiree and just see where she's going.
I can send her the email.
Okie dokie. It's fine. I'll keep everyone entertained. Like little dance. No.
Okay. Hi, Desiree.
Yay!
Hi, I'm early.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
All right. We've introduced you to everybody. We've spoken a little bit about what you're about. So, whenever you're ready. Thank you for coming a couple of seconds early.
I'm a bit shocked. I thought I was just going to get some time, warm in, listen to the last time.
I finished a couple minutes early, and we've been waiting. So thank you for coming early.
Shane, you could have messaged me to say quick.
No, it's all good.
All right, okay. So I'm probably going to be a little bit miserable compared to the last person because that's just who I am. So welcome everyone. I'm not sure how many of you there, but hi. My head is tiny.
I'll put you all so you're just looking at yourself, but we're all still listening. I'll just make it so that it's just you on the screen, Dee. Brilliant.
All right. Okay, thank you. I hate that, but thanks.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Welcome everyone. My name is Desiree, as you can see at the bottom of my screen. I was born and brought up in London. I moved to Sheffield to come to university and haven't left. So been here for quite a long time. So I was contacted by Jake Hurst thinking about so he asked me what do you think would be a good idea, and we had a little chat, and I thought one of the things that seems to be quite important right now is thinking about, in an age of dissent, how useful can creativity be. It's quite a tough one, I thought. I thought it would be the thing that would probably kind of engender some kind of conversation, or at least a few questions and stuff that you can talk about after I've left, after this talk is finished. And that's what we want to do. We want to sort of pose some questions to get you thinking. So quickly, I'm a writer and a creative writing facilitator. I've been writing for a very long time. I have a novel out called Seduce, which is, wow, probably nearly 9 years old by now. Can't quite believe that. And various short stories published online and in publications. And my latest short story is coming out in July with Dead Ink Press, who are an outfit based in Liverpool. So I've been doing this quite a long time, and I have a lot of questions that I ask myself before I write, after I write, during the whole writing process. And I thought one of those things might be interesting if we talked about, when you think about how the state of the world is, are you doing anything to help? Is it useful? Is it something that you should keep going when you're thinking about justice? If you're thinking about social issues, how useful is being creative? How useful is writing? So as always, when we pose a question or provocation, we look at the framing of the question. We look at the language and the terms of the question to ask our own questions. So one of the things that struck me about this idea, or this question about how useful can, in the age of dissent, how useful can creativity be, is that has there ever been a time when there isn't any dissent? Have we had a time when everything's fine for everybody? Of course, the answer to that is no, not at all. So thinking about where we're at, we're not in a new place in one sense. And me and my family and the communities in which I reside have been fighting a long time for those ideas about justice and social equity. It does feel like a different time right this minute, though, and you can argue with me and tell me what you think. It does feel like a particular time right now because of the focus of Black Lives Matter, Extinction Rebellion, and even the protests around about Sarah Everard has given us, in that we seem to be in a time propelled by social media where we are discussing, we are arguing, we are debating far more than we used to. This comes with a plus and a minus. That could mean good things. It could also mean quite destructive things. It can mean binary arguments that spiral and get us nowhere. But it could also mean a revealing and an uncovering of stuff that we perhaps wouldn't have seen had somebody not had a camera on or some audio on, recording and filming the stuff that's going on that we don't necessarily see on the news or in our feeds without those things happening. So it's a plus and a minus. So in asking the question, or in answering the question, is any creativity useful? I mean, at all. Is any creativity useful? And by useful, again, we have to ask another question. What do we mean by useful? Well, I see, so this is very personal to me, and I do not prescribe it to everybody or to all your writers here. I don't say that's what you have to do, but this is what I choose to do. I see creativity as having a purpose, and that is to bear witness, to illuminate, to recall, to document, to discuss, blow apart, provide a counter narration, etc., etc. I think you get what I mean. But that's just me. But let's think about art in general. So art has always been connected to money, to patronage. And in fact, patronage is probably one of the ways in which we now have, or one of the ways that we think we now have, because obviously there's works that we don't know about and have not discovered or not been brought to us. But patronage is a way in which we have access to what's considered great works of art today. But again, thinking about money and thinking about capitalism, because art and capitalism, creativity and capitalism have always been connected. You've only got to look at Simon and Schuster. Any of you guys know about the controversy of Simon and Schuster's recent signings? So Simon and Schuster's recent crop of signings, most of them so far have been Trump's foot soldiers, the ones that provided cover for his misogynistic, racist, ableist ways. And they have massive, massive book deals, thereby demonstrating that publishers feel no moral compunction to do the right thing. And I think that's an interesting question. That's an interesting point where we're at, where publishers are openly just Let's just, when we're not where we're at, they always were about the money. That's what I said. But now that we all know, because of social media, that they're signing Kellyanne Conway and Mike Pence and other people who we might find a little bit detestable. So thinking that somehow literature is something more worthy or not connected to capitalism or not connected to cash is probably not no. So we're thinking about Charmin's sister, but let me know what you think about that, because I find the whole thing quite interesting and what it is that they were trying to do or what they continue to try to do. And beforehand, I think that Penguin had a strike. Some of its workers went on strike because of somebody that they signed who they felt was harmful and incredibly transphobic, incredibly homophobic, but yet they still signed him. So think about that. Also think about that before you before you choose your publisher. Have a think about who they are and who else is in the stable, because it might be things that you disagree with. Don't put yourself in that position. Anyway, so as I'm saying, so art and creativity and capitalism money have always been linked. So once a writer told me, he asked me this question. He said, "What do you think happens in a coup?" And I was like, that they pull down communications, they murder generals, take out kings and queens. In a coup, what happens? Well, in a modern coup, what happens is, what he said to me is that they kill the writers first. They kill the communicators first. They kill the people. And he lived through a coup. He lived through the Grenadian coup. I don't know if many of you know about America invading Grenada. Back in the 80s, I think. So actually, or maybe it's the 70s. But actually, what he said, I thought it really struck me, is that actually, yes, writers are at the time, and probably for all time, and even right now, constantly under surveillance, constantly held up to ridicule, locked up, murdered, journalists murdered, people disappear, writers disappear. And I think that's something that we have to think about as writers that are living here, as writers that have the privilege of being based in England, and also have the privilege or citizenship. It may not feel like a privilege at times. It certainly doesn't feel that way to me, but I'm recognizing that where I am and compared to where other people are, and how their lives are and what they do with their creativity, and how they have to stifle what they want to say, and how they have to work around security forces and governments in order to communicate. It's very, very different to being here. So I was thinking about works of art and great works of protest art, because we're talking about this age of dissent, aren't we? So I was thinking about perhaps Picasso's Guernica, which is I think it's 1937. Yeah, 1937, which is just before the Second World War, and it was an anti-war painting, and just before the Second World War. So you see how prophetic that is. And the other images that are, in my opinion, art that can continuously move us into action and move us emotionally. So stuff like the images of the Vietnam War, from the pictures of a little black girl trying to go to school in a sea, wading through a sea of white screaming faces. They affect us and move us to action, these kinds of images, and they frame how we live, and they also frame how we want to live. So from the songs sung by the enslaved, which underpins jazz, underpins soul, reggae, rock, hip hop, to the writings of, say, Toni Morrison or Margaret Atwood, the idea of protesting where you're at and documenting where you're at and thinking about where you want to go, they're all contained in these writings of like amazing writers, and now there's loads more that you guys can share in the chat, but there's loads more. So thinking about it again, so being a Black woman, that my very existence as a writer is a counter narrative, and it is indeed a protest. And I think I'm in quite good company when I think about it. Like Brecht, Nawal El Saadawi, women that have documented who they are and where they are, and they've done it, not me at all, but they've done it under protest, they've done it under threat of violence, and it's still creativity. It's still her stories. Nawal El Saadawi's stories are phenomenal. I'll encourage you to read them as short stories in particular. I really, really like. So in times of trouble, in a way that cannot be done by any other means, I don't think, documents where we are and where we want to be. And thinking about this again, that we learn about history, for good or for bad, through creativity. We learn about history through Shakespeare and awful TV dramas. That, you know, like that horrible drama. There's so many of them. There's Downton Abbey, that's it. There's so many of them. And by horrible, I think they just, because they're twee, they're very middle class, and they project a certain worldview that doesn't necessarily relate to a huge amount of people. And when was the last time that we read an actual book about history? Well, I haven't. Well, no, actually, I have recently because I had to for work, but we don't generally, as a general reading public, we don't rush out to buy the latest history books. And obviously history books don't mean truth either, but I'm just trying to demonstrate how amazing and also quite frightening in a way that we're using creativity as a way of talking about truth, which I think is very difficult and very problematic, and something that we should all be guarded against. At the same time, thinking like, you know, the guy that was up in arms, the Doctor Who writer that was up in arms about there being a mixed cast for Black and brown soldiers during the Victorian age. I've forgotten his name. He was really upset about it and thought it was a really bad thing to do. Really. And at the time, you know, he was kind of told off and on Twitter like that were ridiculous. And of course there were a lot of Black and brown soldiers in Victorian times in England. So he obviously didn't check that history, did he? But then it made me think about who's writing those stories, who's documenting those stories. And those stories still, to me, need to come out. Or the guy who ran for, I don't even want to say his name, who ran for London mayor, getting upset because in 1917 there was a montage footage at the beginning, and there was some Indian soldiers in that montage. It was a montage, so that means it was seconds. But still, he was really upset about it and didn't feel it represented the British spirit. But the British spirit is a mixed heritage. So when I think about that and think about that weird polarization, this is where creativity comes in and does something a little sneaky, like 1917. Just having an image of those soldiers there was enough to kind of disrupt the narrative a little bit, which I kind of appreciated. So we go back to the original question about, well, how useful is it? So for me, these times are exactly the times where creativity is needed the most. And I charge that we actually can't leave it to anyone else. And now is the time to write those stories that refute all the things that have gone before, so that we can forge a new future. Thank you. A bit quick. I can now take some questions. If anybody's got any?
Yes. Thank you for that, by the way. I didn't know about Simon and Schuster.
Ah, yeah. It's massive controversy. They've been doing it a while, where they just sign up. They signed up Josh Hawley. If I don't know if you know, do you know who he is?
No.
He was the guy, during the insurrection.
Yeah.
On January the 6th. So he was the guy, white guy, of course, who held up his fist as he was walking into Congress to the crowd outside. So people are charging him with saying that he actually was part of engendering the big lie about the election. And he's the only one, I think, that did have a book deal. I'm not sure who that was with. It wasn't with Simon Schuster. I'm not even sure. He did have a book deal, and then they dropped him. And then of course he then complained about cancel culture. I don't know how you can cancel somebody with millions of followers, or it doesn't make any sense. It made no sense. But they announced. I finished. They signed Kellyanne Conway and Mike Pence.
Oh.
God.
Oh.
I know.
Oh, no.
I know.
Oh, wow. That's really bad. That was a really, really interesting talk. Thank you so much. That was very cool. Just waiting for a couple of questions to come in. But Sophia, I think you've already got a couple lined up, haven't you?
Yeah, so I have one. You said about creativity being used to be your purpose in a sense. So my question was, does creativity come easy to you, or how do you get that creativity?
That's a very good question. I think because you guys are writers, aren't you, as well? Aren't you, both of you?
Yes.
Are you doing short stories, prose, plays? What do you?
I do a mixture, so I do short stories and plays and some poetry.
Oh,
yeah,
great.
I do short stories and poetry mostly.
Oh, I love a short story. I'm so glad it's making a resurgence.
Right.
Where do I get my creativity? I get it from all kinds of different places. Sometimes it could be a color, it could be something that somebody says that sparks me off, especially my mom. She's full of wonderful, weird sayings that make you think, what is that? And then you look it up and find it's rooted in something 19th century or something. So I listen to people quite a lot. And I simultaneously find it easy and hard. So there are some days when I write something and I'm like, what the hell? I am the best writer there ever is. And within seconds of reading it again, is that's the worst thing anyone has ever written. So I think that one of the things that I've tried to master, and I'm still really trying, is my own sense of nerves and my own kind of imposter syndrome and my own self-inflicted stuff that nobody needs to know about. But actually, I think writing for me is very much linked to reading. So there are days when I think, why am I so miserable? And that's because I haven't read anything. Oh, why are things just feeling not as good as they could? Because I haven't written anything. And I forget that about myself. I have friends message me, you feeling all right? No. Oh, maybe you should write something. And I think, okay, now I feel settled. I came from quite a difficult home life in London, and writing and reading was a way of escape. It was a way of travel. It's a way of having a life that you'd like, especially when you're, like a teenage girl. You want to live this life that's completely and utterly shut to you on the outside world, but you open a book and you're right there. And so I think for me, it's always difficult, and at the same time, an imperative that I can't quite let go of too.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Thank you. That was a really good answer. We just have some questions pop up in the chat. Jake's just asked, hi Dee, what do you think are some of the best avenues for people trying to find politically alternative and relevant work?
Boy, okay. It's a biggie. One of the things that I could do is that I could always write a reading list, if you'd like.
Yeah.
Which you can show to people. But I do think that, you know, you guys are younger than me and you probably know far more than I do about stuff that's being written about right now. But I do think, whilst I have a love-hate relationship with social media, I'm crap at it for a start, so I don't do much of it. So if anybody starts to follow me on Twitter, they'll get bored quite quickly. But a lot of stuff that I've read has been on Twitter. A lot of the beautiful analytical arguments about what's going on and about where we live have been journalists that are writing on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook anymore because that was just a rabbit hole that was doing my head in. But if you check out certain hashtags and stuff on Twitter and Instagram, then you can find the right writers. There's a whole heap of writers. I mean, like I said, like Nawal, I'm rereading this just to show you. I'm rereading Death of an Ex-Minister, and she died this year. Do you know her writing?
No, I don't.
Oh,
Right. Okay. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad I've shared this with you so that you can get to know her then. I'm a little bit jealous, actually. You know, when you pass on somebody, you pass on a great thing, you think, oh, they're going to get to read that all again. Beautiful. And her stuff is incredible. Egyptian feminist who's her main story, her main book that broke it big was Woman at the Point of Zero, at point zero, Woman at Point Zero, and The Hidden Face of Eve. So check her out as somebody. I like Roxane Gay, who she does. She writes essays and she's a journalist. You guys know Roxane Gay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's incredible. Do not tweet her; she'll come for you. But she's the things that she writes about being Black, about being fat, the way fat phobia works on all of us as women, the way that race works on us as people. She has an incredible voice, but probably not necessarily fiction. But she did do a couple of Black Panther graphic novel episodes. Kiese Layman, so he's Kiese Layman, Laymon. His writing is phenomenal. He writes for teenagers, which I think is this burgeoning space where we can talk about social justice, but for teenagers. And he wrote a book called Long Division, which is like, I suppose, what we would call here speculative fiction. So he jumps through time, a little bit like Octavia Butler does. I presume you know Octavia Butler as well, don't you? So she did stuff that was about time jumps and sci-fi, imagining a Black past and a Black future, which is an incredible work and works of protest in a way, because we're not given this stuff. She just decided to write it, and it means that it poses a counter narrative. You know, okay, that's you. Is your house on fire?
No, sorry.
The list, I could go on, Jake. The list is huge, so I'll make sure to like put in send you an email with some stuff that I think you guys would like to read.
Yes, please do. That would be amazing. Actually, we can pass it on to everybody. I'm sure everyone was so interested in that. We've got a question just popped through from Harry saying, how important do you think is literature as a way of advocating for the working class or marginalised communities in 21st century Britain?
Whoa!
Hi. Just some easy questions.
These questions are great. I think that's one of the things that we neglect to talk about. So I did an event for New Writing North, they're called, and they're based in Newcastle, and they're a beautiful writers organization that try to put on courses and prizes and whatever. Anyway, so I did an event for them, and they said, what do you think the gap? Is there a gap in the market? And I thought, wow, like I know anything about the market. But I do think that there is a lack of working class stories in all of our creativity. Now, I think that's linked to, because I can remember Thatcher. So, and the era in which creativity was squashed in school. Michael Gove et al. squashed creativity in school. So there wasn't any more music taught, so where you're taught about interpretation. There wasn't any more drama taught, where you're taught about drama, about narrative, about writing for voice. There's all different kinds, apart from acting, if that's what you want to do, but there's all different kinds of ways in which these creative arts taught in schools brought about these working class stories. And then, because they're not being taught in school, so art is taught, I think, still, so you can still do an A level in art and stuff, but the other creative arts have been kind of squashed in comprehensive schools, but then they got moved to private schools. So then, and of course, private schools have all the means and all the money to put on these creative courses, which then leads to these creative courses being producing people that produce work from that starting point. So private schools go on to these kind of red brick universities, and then they become execs of Channel 4 or BBC editors, or, you know, and it has a knock-on effect. It's like a drop in a pond. So working class stories, whilst it was massive in the 60s, and I'm not as old as that, but whilst it was massive in the 60s, they used to be called kitchen sink dramas, where Coronation Street came out of that era, that actually there's been less of that now. Working class stories are less and less and less. And I believe it's an intersection. So working class and Black, working class and queer, working class and disabled. These stories aren't told as much as they should be. And I would charge that all of you will have to write those stories. All of you have those experiences. All of you, in some way, shape, or form, have something that will relate to that. And I would also say, even if you feel like you don't, have a look at Eudora Welty, her short story. Have you seen? Catherine's nodding her head. Great. So that short story, I think, is a real, it's a real lesson in perspective and point of view. And if you choose to tackle a story that you think, actually, this is not exactly about me, check that story out. It's called Where Is This Voice Coming From? Eudora Welty, and it was written in the 50s, wasn't it, Catherine?
I think so, yeah.
Right. Where she talks about the murder. Anyway, I won't spoil it for you, but I think it's a real lesson on what we think about point of view. And if you feel like you can't enter a story because the space isn't yours, like you want to write about somebody, like an issue that you feel like isn't about you, Eudora Welty's twisting of that idea really shows you something really, really cleverly done. And so I think it's important. I think that, no, we don't have enough working class stories, and we don't have enough working class TV. TV writing is becoming huge right now. And so if any of you, again, putting it all on your shoulders, if any of you want to come up with those stories, it's important. And I think, like I say in my little talk, it's also how we navigate the world. So if you were an alien and you were looking down on Earth right now, and you decided to put your TV on, what would you see? You know, who are the stories based around? Mostly blokes, mostly white blokes, mostly crime. And I think that times are changing.
Totally. We've got, I think, 2 more questions have popped through. So from Alessandra, thank you for talking about this. Creativity is indeed so powerful, and publishers certainly hold a lot of power. Do you think we live in a time where it is easier or more difficult to be heard?
I think in a way it's easier. I think obviously it's easier if you're younger also. I think there's obviously something about age there and gender, perhaps, because I can, you know, you see on social media, men get loads more followings than women do. And, you know, I think that's just a standard. And like, you know, so male writers will get far more followers than women do. And even though we're in a kind of renaissance of writing and of publishing, women still don't get the massive prizes. Women still don't get the reviews. I think there was a big joke about is it the London Review of Books? How many women they actually review, and somebody made it into like a bingo, to like a bingo game because, you know, spot the woman's book that gets reviewed. So what was the question again? So
do you think we live in a time where it is easier or more difficult to be heard?
Okay, so I think that social media serves a great function here. Whilst I have a difficult relationship with it, it can serve that function where you get to hear about competitions, you get to hear about anthologies that you wouldn't hear unless you were on social media. And it would be somebody that you know, that you know, that you know. So the fact that not just massive competitions, but small publishers, which I think, and I've always said, have consistently done the heavy lifting of big publishers. Small publishers will publish that trans person's book, will publish that Black woman's book more so than any other publisher. So if you're, when you come out of the course and you're thinking that I want to go big, by all means, definitely, but don't sniff your nose at a small publisher because they might be more likely to take that chance than big publishers, because we already know big publishers are concerned with money, right? So think about it anyway. But also there's a huge plethora of online magazines that have started up in recent years. Magazines that's about feminisms, magazines that's about disabilities, magazines that are about place, like, you know, whether it's based in Sheffield or based in Brighton. And so there's more chances to be published, definitely, but will that be heard? That's the question, because I think publishing still ignores anybody outside London. You know, you barely get a look in if you're Brighton, let alone going further. If you go the opposite end and going north, going back to what we were saying about underrepresented writers, I think going past Milton Keynes, the writers don't get a look in beyond that either. So I think you have more opportunities to be published, but in terms of it generating something about you or giving you a bigger platform, the best ways to do those things, and you can see that my platform is tiny because I don't know what I'm doing. I need somebody young to help me with my social media. But where it can, those things happen when you contribute to anthologies, when you're contributing to talks, things like this, and where you do stuff almost outside the writing is what I've noticed recently. So people who put on their own magazines, put on their own writing events, put on poetry nights, or that seems to generate a platform that you might want to think about, as well as the writing. But also you've got to be consistent, and I'm just not.
Oh my God. Wow.
I'm not consistent on social media. I come in, I dip out, I go in, I dip out, I go for weeks and not saying anything, and then suddenly something strikes me, and I'm like, you know, you need somebody that's, and then it's somebody that says, oh, you gotta post at this time, you gotta post on this day to make it relevant. It's just up to you guys, man.
Fair enough. You're doing enough, don't worry.
Yeah.
Wow, that was all really, really interesting.
Yeah.
For you,
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for all of that. Everyone had a lot of interesting things to ask you. That was amazing. Yeah, I if that's everything for me, if you're all good, Sophia, that's been perfect. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us, Dee. That's all been absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Good luck with the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
It was so cool.
That was so cool. I really, really liked that. That was amazing. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna take intermission now. So we've got and we're all gonna come back at 3 o'clock to listen to Caraline and Sean's presentation. So yes, it's been fantastic so far. So see you all at 3 o'clock, hopefully.
Yeah, here's to everyone having a good tea break.
All right, bye-bye. How do I? Hi. Brilliant. I hope
Hello.
everyone had a good intermission. Everyone's gotten their new cups of tea and had gone to the bathroom. Yeah.
Hey.
Fantastic. So, oh, sorry, we had some feedback there. So we're next going to be hearing from Caraline, who is, I can just see, has just entered onto the thing, so she's ready for us. So Caroline's going to be talking to us about, so she's a author and a businesswoman, and we've asked her to talk about the business side of her career and everything that she's done, basically, because she's had a really interesting experiences so far. So she's very graciously offered to talk us through all of those. So Caraline, if you're ready, I'll pop you onto the stream.
Okay. Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Yay!
Oh, fantastic. So shall I start?
Yes, we're going to make it so that it's just your face on the screen, so everyone doesn't look at us for any longer. They've been dealing with us all day.
Okay.
So I'll just put you on. Perfect. Ready when you are.
Okay. Hello. Well, thanks for the lovely introduction. As I said, my name's Caraline Brown. I've been a businesswoman, and I'm really chuffed to pieces to say I'm now an author. I've spent most of my life earning my living from writing. I knew I wanted to be a writer from the age of about 9. So it was, so everything I've done, all my life choices have been towards, it's really disconcerting talking to yourself on the screen. So all my life choices have been towards trying to put myself in a position where I could become a full-time writer. I was originally I became a technical writer. I was lucky enough to work with some of the very earliest desktop publishing in this country, and I think I produced some of the first computer manuals using desktop publishing. So in those days, the Apple Macs were this sort of size, tiny wee little things, and I had an Amstrad 8256. And I'd run the software on the Amstrad and follow the instructions, then type them up on the Apple Mac, press go, and the sheets would come out 300 dots per inch. And that was what would go straight to the printers, because it was very good, because if there are any mistakes, you could simply change them. I set up my own business 1995. I saw the internet was coming, and I thought there was great opportunity to do PR focused entirely on internet-based companies. So in 1995, I set up Midnight Communications. As I said, we were the very first at the time, and we had the market to ourselves for a good 3 or 4 months until others started to get the idea, and they started to set up their companies. In those early days, it was a fantastic time. It was just like the Wild West, because you were getting business proposals for new startups were coming in the door, 5, 6, 7 a week, and sometimes you get the same idea would come 2 or 3 times. We were privileged to do a number of fantastic launches. We launched the very first online DVD, CD delivery service in the UK. We did the first online comedy streaming gig. We did the first online divorce, which was fantastic, because we needed to have a good hook for this. So we thought, let's phone the Vatican Press Office and see what they think about being able to download your divorce papers online. And of course, they said it's the end of the world as we know it. Great quote, please. And we made the front page of the Observer. So happy days. We did the very first work about email Father Christmas and tell him what you want. And I'm proud to say I was the world's first online agony aunt for a good 6 months, the things one does for one's clients, and actually had a radio show on BBC Sussex, and used to have to go and answer people's live online live problems on the radio, which was one of the most difficult, challenging things I've ever had to do. Because of course, with radio, you don't want there can't be any noise, there can't be any silence, so you have to fill it. So when somebody asks you a question, you can't just sit there and go, let me think about that for a moment. You have to be talking all the way through it. So yeah, so that was very, very challenging. I started off with a £2,000 overdraft in 1995, and we doubled our turnover. We did 100 grand in the first year, doubled the turnover the following year, doubled it the third year, and we were named the fastest growing PR company in the UK 2 years running. From 95 to 2000, it was, wow, it was probably the most fascinating, stressful, hard-working time of my life. As I said, we doubled turnover, and from 95 to 2000, we ended up at a 1.3 million turnover company. I had 40 staff and 2 offices. Some people in London, some in Brighton, and of course you didn't know half the people in London. That wasn't the happiest of times. I sold the business 2000 just before the first .com crash, and bought it back again 3 years later, largely because the people I'd sold it to were a bunch of losers, frankly, and they were making a mess of it and their own business. And I was lucky enough to be able to get it back again. Built it up, went through the recession, 2008, 2009. That was probably one of the lowest points, as when everybody was talking about the recession. The majority of our clients were American, and the Americans were just starting to pull out of the UK. It was very challenging. We lost half our staff. But we managed to keep going. We managed to stay afloat and build it back up yet again. And then around about the year 2016, I've been doing this for about 22 years. And the thing I'd always wanted to do, obviously, was to become a writer. I joined New Writing South. I joined the creative writing program there, which was absolutely fantastic, and I can honestly say it changed my life. We would meet on a weekly basis, we'd be given tasks, we'd draft our writing, somebody would criticize it. And I can still remember my first, posted something on Facebook. We said, I just got my first bit of feedback on my writing back, and apparently it's really good. And of course, in those days, it's all very well, we all want to be, a famous DJ or a musician or a writer, but we just don't know if we're ever going to be any good at it. So I was greatly encouraged, and it took me about 3 or 4 years to finish this book. Oh, I should add that what got me onto the course in the first place was that at the beginning of 2016, I thought, right, I am going to make my lifetime ambition come true. So I packed up myself and the dog in the car, and we drove to Ibiza with a book under my arm called How to Write a Novel in 30 Days, because I thought I could do anything, can't I? Write a novel in 30 days is, if I could run a business, I could write a novel in 30 days. Oh, what foolish words they were. There are enough things that happened to me in Ibiza to fill a book in itself. I really wish I'd kept a diary at the time, but suffice to say, I got one of those, laundry pods. I managed to get one of those in my eye and ended up blinded for about 4 days. My best friend came to visit me, and we had the most awful round, didn't talk for months. I saw a man fall off the running machine in the gym and die. And that's just some of what happened. But anyway, I digress. I got back to England, and I thought to myself, I am going to go and do this properly. So I joined the New Writing South and started to write. I'd come across this book called The Georgia Menagerie. And of course, everyone wants to be a writer. What are you going to write about it? And I think the reason a lot of people fail is they don't have a fully realized story. And they get 20,000 words done, but they go, oh, what am I going to do now? But I was lucky enough, I came across this book called The Georgia Menagerie, and it told how animals were kept, exhibited, cared for, in inverted commas, in the late 18th century, around about 1780. And as soon as I started to imagine the characters in there, originally the story was going to be about a vet who goes to London and he becomes an apprentice. It was going to be called The Vet's Apprentice. But then after, it took me about a year, I think, and I suddenly realised, no, I wanted to see what a woman would be like. And I came up with this character of Lillian. She's 6 foot. She's a bit like Lady Brienne of Tarth in Game of Thrones, if you want to imagine it. Really, really, really tall, ungainly, uncomfortable, but still looking for her place in the world. And of course, these animals are coming from all over the world. They're being brought daily. This is in the days when England ruled the waves, and you couldn't move on the Thames because there were so many boats coming up the Thames. Sometimes you'd need to wait for a week before you could actually turn the boat around because there were so many boats. So these boats are bringing animals from Australia, bringing kangaroos, and rhinoceroses, and elephants, all over the world. And of course, there were no zoos, and these animals are completely out of place, out of their home and out of their comfort zone. And I wanted to see what it was like to find a woman who was out of her comfort zone and the animals, and how the two might interact. And the Campbell Menagerie was born. It was originally called Lillian in the Campbell Menagerie. But of course, people shorten it down. I was lucky. I've had a lot of luck in my life. I put together my 10,000 words of the story. I sent it off as a short resume to as many agents as I could find, and I was introduced to a publisher in New York, a real fast-growing independent publisher, who said they loved it and they wanted to publish it, and I think I might have it here. Yep, there it is. The proudest day of my life was when this arrived. Because people go to you, oh, are you self-published? You go, no. Oh, is it in paperback? And you go, no, it's a proper hard copy book. And one of the greatest days of my life was seeing it in the window at City Books and going past them, pointing and going, that's me in the window. I'm waiting for the paperback to come out. Hopefully that should be out end of this year, early next year. What's it been like in the pandemic? Well, bloody awful, really. Nowadays, publishers rely on you to do the majority of the publicity yourself. And being in PR, of course, I've set up talks at Waterstones at City Books because it's published in the US and I've got some good contacts in the US. The plan was to go there, do some radio stations, put on my best British accent and talk about life in the colonies back in 1780. But of course, all of that went out the window. I have milked my Instagram and Facebook to pieces. Everything I can do that has to do with the book, I try and publicize it. And I must say Goodreads has been a fantastic source for me. I've had I've got 4 or 5 star reviews for the book, going very well. People do seem to like it, thank the Lord. And I'm really hoping that by the time the paperback comes out, which will come out in the States again, first of all, I'll be able to go there and maybe do some small publicity campaign of some sort, we hope. I now have an agent, an English agent, so my next book will be published here in the UK. It's called The Hangman's Wife, and I'm really excited about it, although I'm on the second draft. I've got about 5 pages of the second draft to go, and I'm still getting mixed ideas about what happens to the characters in the end. But that will be out, I would hope, 18 months, a year, 2 years, I really don't know. This writing lark is a bloody hard slog. I sit here in my study most days. I read somewhere, force yourself to write every single day. And I have my plan is sit down at 1 and I'll stay here till 5. Even if I'm just messing around on Facebook or something, I'm here at my desk doing something. And I've got another 80,000 word novel, so I have done it. But now I've got to turn it into something worthwhile that you guys hopefully will want to read. I think that's about all I have to say. Somebody said about publishing in the post-COVID world. I think a lot more books, yes, are going online. Sales of Kindle books have grown tremendously. But being an old-fashioned girl, there is nothing like seeing your book in hardback. And I think people will always want to hold something in their hands, and they'll want to turn the page and just treasure life in the analog zone, as opposed to everything have to be digital and in the cloud. That's it. Thank you very much.
That was
Thank you.
an interesting presentation, Caraline. Thank you so much. That was really interesting to hear your journey and everything that you've gone through as a writer to come to this point. And congratulations on finally being able to publish your book. I was sitting here listening. I was like, oh, I'm so happy for you that you've done everything and you've done this. And the book looks fantastic.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm always happy to. You've got my email address. If anyone ever wants to, drop me a line or wants advice or something, I'm more than happy to help and to offer.
Well, if you had any advice for uni students or anything looking to have this sort of career that you've had, or to go, to publish and to go into create businesses and whatnot, what would you say if you could?
You have to be tenacious. Tenacity is the answer to everything. I think if I'd given up, if I'd taken no for an answer on numerous occasions in the past, I certainly wouldn't have enjoyed the successes I've enjoyed. And you've just got to keep going. Have confidence in yourself. That's the other thing. It's really hard. You think you've heard of imposter syndrome. Me. How can anyone possibly want to read mine? And even now, when I get someone text me and go, "Oh, I've just finished your book. It's really good." You go, "I don't care what you think. You know me. I want to know what people who don't know me think." Because you still think that people are just trying to be nice to you, but working hard and being tenacious and not taking no for an answer is the only way to succeed.
That's interesting that you brought up imposter syndrome, because Adam brought that up earlier, and we have spoken about that. So it's an issue that I think everybody faces in their own ways. Is that? But we've got some questions come through.
Okay.
Gerald asks, what qualities does the PR industry look for in a creative writing graduate?
Oh, well, being able to write is the first one. Being able to use punctuation and correct grammar. I know that sounds crazy, but you would be so surprised. Here's a tip for anyone applying for a job. When jobs, particularly into PR and creative media, they are so hard to come by. And if you are sending off your CV along with, say, 100 others, I don't have time to read through each CV in minute detail. I will make a decision really early on based on the use of language. And if there's any typos, bang, they're gone. Typos, if you can make a typo in a job application for something that's going to change your life, what if you made a typo in a press release that's something that is really, really crucial, and that's going to get us fired by the client? And that has happened. I've seen that happen. I think you need to make an impact soon. Try not to use words like, "Oh, my journey, I've done this or I've done that." Try and sound interesting, but be concise and witty and charming, and you might just get through to the second round. But accuracy and attention to detail is everything.
Totally, I can imagine that it is pointless when somebody hands in CVs like that. I can empathise with that. I was wondering personally, what COVID had taught you about how, the changing of industries and everything, and what this same year has taught you about the career world and your career specifically and everything.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted that I am not I'm not in business to the extent that I was during COVID. My heart goes out to anybody who's trying to run a business and look after staff. I mean, a lot of my staff are under 30, and working with them, encouraging them, supporting them through the difficult times is so much easier to do when you can put your arm around somebody and walk around the block if they're crying, or shout at them if they're going around slamming doors. It's how you manage somebody online, I have no idea, and I'm really glad that I've missed out on that opportunity. Also, I'm so glad I don't have to just deal with people in this digital world. I'm standing here looking at myself rather than a sea of faces, and it would have been so much more fun to seeing who I'm talking to and seeing all these, young people who want to do interesting things. Hey, there's a face. Hello.
That was completely my fault. I completely forgot to switch us onto this screen. I'm so sorry.
It's not just us oldies then.
Sorry, we've been sitting here nodding along and smiling, and you have to
okay. Yeah, because you need a bit of feedback. You need some feedback, don't you?
I'm so sorry. That is completely my fault.
No problem.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, right. Oh, we've had another question pop through from Harry. Harry says, "Thank you for this talk. Any writers you personally admire or have had as personal idols during difficult times?"
Oh, I love David Mitchell. Cloud Atlas. I just adore his work. He is the most original, clever, smart writer I know. I've just finished reading Sarah Waters' Tipping the Velvet. I've gone back to that. I think that when I was younger, you'd find a writer you liked and then read everything by them, and then you'd go back and read it again and again. Nowadays, you tend to get, here's the Booker long list, and you tend to work your way through the long list as opposed to individual writers. But those are the two that come to mind.
Brilliant. Sophia, did you have any questions?
No, I didn't. I mean, I'm still hung up on you went to Ibiza and then this whole experience.
Yeah, that was hubris in action. That was, But I would say there's about 1,000 words from that time in the book, and so it wasn't a total waste of time. But life's rich tapestry, isn't it? Everything.
Right.
Life is about experience.
One more question from me, just personal curiosity. If you could recommend just one book that you thought everybody should read in their life, apart from your own, what
writing?
Sorry,
about writing, or just a novel?
Just, I mean, anything that comes to mind, really. Anything that you've read that's made an impact on you.
There are so many. There are so many books. If you ask me, probably my number one book of all time in the world is Catch-22. Joseph Helen's Catch-22. That's probably the best book I've ever read, and I've read it more than any other book. I've read it about 7 or 8 times. If you ask me the best book for aspiring writers to read, I would say there's a book by Stephen King called On Writing. Mm-hmm. It's the least pretentious, it's the most directive in terms of, look, you want to be a writer, do this, this and this, rather than, you want to be a writer, and I would recommend that to everybody.
That's fantastic.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for that.
Some good recommendations come through with the other speakers, so we're going to have to, I think, put together some sort of...
it would be lovely to see, yes.
Yeah.
Can I just add that I do offer mentoring services, and if people ever want to talk over their ideas for a book, or whether they feel the story's got legs, or they just want to meet with someone on a one-to-one basis and talk about how they might go about it, you've got my website somewhere. Just send me a message through the website.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
I love helping young writers.
Oh, that's so good to hear. I think we're definitely going to put something together and let everybody know all the help and all the that's been offered and all the reading that's been suggested. It's been a really great recommendations for everybody. So thank you for those. I think we're good. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us. This has been so interesting.
Yeah.
Well done keeping it to the time. I salute you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello. So I can see, so we've just got Sean to hear from now. I can see that he is in the waiting. Oh, there he is. Perfect. Are you ready for us, Sean?
Yes, I am indeed.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, very well, thank you. Very well, guys. Lovely to see you both again after our brief connection this morning. I did manage to dial into the sessions earlier on at the beginning of the day just to get a flavour for what was going on. It sounds like you've had some fascinating insights and fascinating discussion. So it sounds like it's been a great success so far. I can only go downhill from here now. I'm afraid.
Oh no, don't say that.
We'll just end it early, don't worry. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us, Sean. If you're ready, I can put you on so that you're just looking at your own face now instead of ours, if that's all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much, and go right ahead.
Absolutely. Cheers, Catherine. No problem at all. So, yeah, thank you for having me along today to this event. First and foremost, I suppose I was going to talk really about two things today before we open it up for any questions, which is number one, just to give you all a little bit of an insight maybe into the personal journey that we went through in the establishment of Epoch Press. And then just a little bit more about Epoch Press itself and what we're like as an organization, what we're looking for, and maybe some of the challenges as well that we faced over the last sort of 12 to 18 months during COVID. So without further ado, in terms of my own personal journey, we started Epoch Press 3 years ago as an independent publisher. And my background, and it may be surprising to a lot of people on this call, had nothing to do with the publishing industry. I think it resonates with the call. I think it was Andy that was on earlier on today, talking about sort of his breakthrough into the creative industries and sometimes how you have to make your own luck, and sometimes how you also have to pursue your passion and your dreams. So my personal background was in the financial services sector. Worked there for a number of years, just like all good history and English graduates do. So upon graduating from university, that's what I was involved in. But I always had a deep-seated passion for all things literary, instilled in me from a very early age by my parents, who had a deep-seated belief in education for education's sake, but really keeping you focused on the importance of reading, the importance of literature to help you understand the world that we live in, help shape your own thoughts and outlooks upon that world, as well as actually being taken on journeys and exposed to great new thinking. And it's something that I always held with me. And after many years in the financial services sector, I thought, I really want to do something that's different. Really want to do something that I can genuinely put my own personal passion into. So after a period of reflection, toying with various different ideas, and as with all best ideas, it happened in the pub. So I was down there with my co-founder at the time, and we were bouncing ideas around. And I say within the space of 45 minutes, we'd come up with the concept of let's set up an independent publishing company. Let's really put our passions to use. And we designed our logo, came up with our sort of ethos and our vision statement about what we wanted to achieve and by when and how we were going to go about and do that. And following that sort of original inception of the idea, obviously there was a lot of learning and research that we had to do. And maybe picking up on some of the themes from people who've spoken to you earlier on today, it's all well and good about trying to make your own luck and go after your passions, but you also have to do that with some insight and some knowledge that backs it up, that's behind it all. So we did a lot of research, also contacted a lot of the other independent publishers that are out there, the likes of Salt, Galley Beggar Press, Blue Moose Books, some of the publishers that I actually personally really admired, and admired what they'd actually achieved. And they gave me some great, fascinating insights, which then enabled us to go live with our new business, which was Epoch Press. And they were extremely helpful. Actually, there's a great sort of camaraderie and supporting network between the indie publishers as well. And a few people were saying at the time, "Are you crazy? You know, why are you going into this business? There's no money to be had in it." And we were like, "That's fine. We're not in it for the money. We're in it for the passion." And I think what you'll have all seen is maybe a burgeoning in the indie publishing sector at the moment. It feels like that we're almost in a bit of a golden age for it. There are so many great independent publishers out there, probably vacating gaps that have been left by the bigger publishers, who seem to have vacated the field of identifying really new, interesting voices, or really interesting and challenging narratives that they don't necessarily see how that can be commercialized. Whereas we're very much focused on that. That's what we love. That's what drives our passion. And we want to get those great new voices and great new narratives out to as wider a reading audience as possible. And there's been a lot of debate actually within the publishing sector that we're probably, as independent publishers, doing a lot of the hard work in the background now that previously the bigger publishers would have done. But we're constantly out there seeking new talent. So let me talk a little bit about Epoch Press. So Epoch Press itself, we have two key elements to our business. The first is our main publishing imprint. So we're seeking out and looking to champion the very best in new literary voices. Typically that will be in novels or novella format, or collections of short stories. We don't really look at poetry. It's not our key area of expertise. So it's mainly those three areas that we look to sort of champion and represent authors in those fields. And we're always on the lookout for, say, something that's different. I think from the last presentation there with Caraline, she mentioned that, you know, when she's looking at CVs, for example, she's always looking for something that grabs the attention and stands out immediately. And we often get asked that question by aspiring authors and aspiring writers, you know, what is it you're looking for? And it's really hard to answer, actually, apart from saying something that we like, something that really grabs our attention and sort of screams to us to say, this is great writing, you know, this is a great new voice, or it's a great new narrative. So that's what we look at for our main imprint. In addition to that, we also run a regular online magazine that we call our eZine. Actually, if you look at our website and what we're doing, hopefully you'll all say our branding is very consistent. We're very proud of our branding, very proud of our ethos that we put out there. So that's our eZine, and that's where we look to feature a whole plethora of different artistic mediums. So we feature music videos, stop motion animation, short films, poetry, short stories, visual artwork, photography, spoken word. And we do that around a specific theme around about 3 to 4 times a year. And the concept for that was really because we wanted to invest and encourage, I suppose, the sharing of ideas between artists working in multiple different mediums, on the basis that we hoped, for example, a writer may view an absolutely fantastic set of photographic images, and that could be the spark of ideas for them to say, I think I've got an idea now for a novel or a collection of short stories based upon those images that I've seen, and vice versa. So we really wanted to be sort of setting up our online magazine as this place where there's great interpretations of a theme that ultimately will spark new ideas in the creative community. It's great to say that we get around sort of 50,000 hits globally. We've actually featured artists from all around the world in that, Indonesia, Japan, America, Canada, many countries across Europe and Africa. We've also been privileged to feature artists who were finalists in Sky Arts Landscape Artist of the Year, So there's some great selections. Well, I'll encourage you all, by the way, have a look at our website and have a look at those some of those e-zines that may spark ideas for any of you creatives that are out there looking for some inspiration. So that was the business that we've set up. To date, we've obviously brought out a number of titles with our authors that we've really formed great working relationships with. So we place a real sort of pride on building that early relationship with our authors, particularly when it comes to working through the editorial process. Again, it's a question I'm often asked about, you know, from the moment that you've picked up a manuscript that you really like, what happens next? That can actually take quite a considerable amount of time. It can be anything from sort of 8 months to potentially 2 years of then working with that author through 3 different stages of an editorial process. I sort of simplify that down. So we talk about thematic editorial, which is what's the book trying to achieve? Is it thematically actually delivering the author's vision and what they set out to achieve and the impact that it should have? Through to copy editing, where it's all going down to a little bit more detail of, you know, superfluous paragraphs or superfluous sections or tightening up sentences, all the way through to final proofreading and proof editing, which is where we start to have arguments and debates about, does a comma go in this place or there, and what's the intonation that you actually want to achieve with the sentences, as well as spotting the odd typos here or there. So we place a real great importance on the relationship that we develop with our authors. At the moment, we've got a number of writers that we've brought their debut novels to publication. They're spread across the UK and Ireland. We've actually got quite a lot of good connections with the Irish Writers' Centre in Dublin, and various universities over in Ireland as well that we often do events with. So we've actually probably got more of a sway at the moment to our sort of Irish author contingent. But we've got our novelists that will be coming later this year. A new title will be releasing in September, and 2 titles will be releasing next year of our UK-based authors. So yeah, you know, we as all businesses then hit COVID, the great exception that's first coming to define the era that we've all live in and have lived through. And that did have quite a significant impact upon the publishing industry itself. I think Craig Jorgen Baker was on earlier on today, so he would have mentioned about some of the delays that we had in bringing the publication of his novel out. Again, through lots of conversations and discussions with him, it's when can we bring it out? Do we want to delay it another year? And collectively, we made the decision to say no, that we'll bring it out in September, which coincided with the greatest number of books that had ever been published in 1 month before. Obviously, bookshops themselves, such as Waterstones, were no longer holding face-to-face indoor events, so we had to relocate that venue to upstairs room venue of a local pub. It was a great event in the end, but we literally had about a 2-week window that we were lucky enough to be able to do that as a live face-to-face launch. But we obviously have to adapt, and all businesses have to adapt to the circumstances which are placed in front of them. And I think in publishing we were probably a little bit slower than some other industries, but it then became an imperative for us to really embrace online remote working, online digital launches. So we've had two of our authors' events subsequent to Craig's book being published that we've done as an online launch. And I think Caraline said it as well, you know, it's a bit strange at times when you don't get the environment, you don't get to see people's expressions or really sort of have that tactile engagement that you're used to seeing in face-to-face events. But it does have its pros and cons, and we've actually realized that through some of our online launches, we've attracted actually a global audience. So typically when you're doing a book launch, it would be launched in that author's local city at their local bookshop, and therefore people who will be coming to the launch event are typically people within the locale, as opposed to people thinking, I'll jump on a plane from America and come over to join a book launch. So one of the positives that we found is that we did suddenly realize that we were getting people dialing in from all over the world to our launch events. And certainly our learning from that, we're going to take that forward into the future, whereby any launch event that we're doing in the future, we're going to do it as both. So we'll have an online capability with webcams, so people can dial in, see what's going on, and we can still capture that global audience. But obviously, we'll also still have the real face-to-face launch event as well. There was obviously an increase then focus for us on doing more online readings, online events where we reached out to other authors. So not just our own author base. We started to collaborate with some of the publishers. We had the likes of Mike McCormack, who wrote Solar Bones, Goldsmiths Winner Prize. So he came on to do a session with Ryan Dennis, one of our authors who wrote The Beast They Turned Away, which was the last title that we published. We've also had Alan McMonagle do an event with us as well. He's with Picador, the publisher. So it was really great to see different publishers with their own authors all collaborating together to try and just keep the awareness of their authors and keep the awareness of the titles out there. So as I say, that is something that we'll be continuing to do, as well as obviously putting an emphasis on a greater leverage of what we were doing on social media. So I think on our journey, we've also realized the key importance of social media to reaching as wide an audience as we can, to really champion our authors' work. So we've been looking at different mechanisms for how we do that, whether that's by little videos that we can put out or more Q&As with our authors that we can share, to actually give people who maybe again wouldn't be able to attend face-to-face events can get a greater insight into the workings of our authors' minds and what's prompting their reading, what's prompting their writing, and what's prompting some of the themes that they wish to explore in their work. So apologies, that may have been a bit fast-paced, bit of a monologue from me. So I'm going to draw breath. And Catherine and Sophia, I don't know if that was in line with what you were expecting, but happy to open it up and take some questions.
That was
good.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sean. That was really interesting to hear.
Pleasure.
I've got a couple of questions, just personally for myself, actually. I was wondering, you sort of touched on this being a difficult question to answer, so I'm going to ask anyway. What sort of stories like excite you to see as a publisher when something lands on your desk? What sort of things are making you kind of like, oh, this is going to be really good? Like I can see the journey that this book is going to go on. Anything recently that you've put out that springs to mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky question, Catherine, right? Because, I mean, personally, I've got quite eclectic taste in literature as well, right? So just to give you a bit of an insight, aside from our authors, you know, it was interesting to hear Caraline actually talk about David Mitchell and Cloud Atlas. Love him, love Haruki Murakami. One of my favorite books of all time is Wuthering Heights. You know, so I love the classics. I love modern work. I will read experimental fiction. So I love so many different genres and so many different writers. So what's the thing that really connects with me? So maybe let me bring this up to life with some of our actual titles. So one of our works is called Up or Down by David Brennan. And what really, really resonated with me on that is the voice. So as soon as I started reading it, I was immediately engaged by this just crazy, unique voice that it actually created for the central character, right? And I was just bowled over by it straight away. And to be quite honest, I was almost like, I almost don't care how good the rest of this novel is, right? I've been so overwhelmed with this voice that if this requires us to spend 2 years working with the author to get the rest of the novel in shape, then so be it, because his voice deserves to be out there, right? Likewise with Craig's book. Actually, the first I heard of Craig was when he did a speaking session at the Scriveners events that he runs with the university, and he stood up and read a short story, and I was just like, oh my god, right, Craig, have you written a novel? No. Well, you're going to write one now. Because, you know, again, that voice, the sense of comedy, it was just, you know, the pace, the intonation of it was absolutely fantastic. Our latest title, actually, The Beasts They Turned Away, very unique, very clipped, very short sentences, very fragmentary in its nature of not only the structure of the sentences and the paragraphs, but actually the structure of the chapters themselves. And again, so unique. And one of the great compliments we had paid by Mike McCormack, who is the, you know, Goldsmiths winning prize author, who actually introduced Ryan at the launch event, was actually to say, you know, fair kudos to Epoch Press, because most publishers wouldn't have gone near this with a barge pole because it's not commercial. And he said, but it's just, it's there. And he said, there's no sitting on the fence with it, right? People are going to hate it or they're going to love it. And in fact, one of our team, we have a team of reviewers and who help read submissions and all that for us as well. One of them just said, I threw the book across the room because I just could not get on with that book at all. And the rest of us are going, oh my God, no, we absolutely love it. This is fantastic. So isn't that the beauty of literature, though, right? The beauty of literature for me is that it will encourage an extreme reaction. Otherwise, what's the point in reading? What's the point in writing? So, you know, I can also spot a mile off things that are almost done in the, here's the dot by dot sort of painting by numbers approach to creating a novel, right? And, you know, if you put it together this way, you'll write a good novel. And that is probably good for some publishers who are looking for that. How do we sell it? You know, I'd be surprised the number of people who've pitched their next novel to me by here's the next normal people. And it's like, yeah, but it's not normal people, is it? Yeah, that's there. It's been done. And it's great, by the way. I love Normal People, right? Really, really good book. Just on the flip side of that, I also like A Girl Is a Half-Formed Thing by Eamon McBride. You know, two very, very different reads and two very, very different styles, both really passionate. Now, the reason I mention that is because don't sell your work as if it's comparable to someone else's. It's your work. Yeah, and for me, certainly, it's I'm looking for that. It's got to be unique. The person who's written has got to be really confident in their voice and their passion for it. So sorry, Catherine, long-winded answer to your question.
That was fantastic. That was a brilliant answer. Thank you. I know it was a hard question, but I was wondering it for myself.
Yeah, no, same. I was also wondering that.
Yeah, it's an interesting opportunity to pick someone's mind, you know, to see the whole process. We've had a question come through from Alessandra, actually. She's asked, but she said, it's so inspiring to see the idea of founding an independent publishing house become a successful reality. What are the greatest challenges in the process of making ideas happen?
Oh, the challenge in the process of making ideas happen. I think one thing is, I often say, how do you take the inherently complex and make it simple, right? Because I think often when you're coming up with a new idea, you've got so many thoughts and so many things that you need to do. And, you know, often, you know, there's the old quote, isn't there, allegedly by Oscar Wilde, if you're in doubt, attribute it to Oscar Wilde, right? But, you know, it's apologies for the long letter because I didn't have time to write a short one, right? And I think that's similar within business. It's, you know, throwing your thoughts down, it can be quite complex and you've got to distill it back to its most simple element. So for us, it was, we want to publish great books and we want to encourage artists in different mediums to share ideas. Right. Let's try and execute on that as our bare minimum. Right. So that was one of the first steps, Alessandra. What else did you say? Sorry. What are the greatest challenges in the process of making ideas happen? So it's then trying to sit back and often balance the creative idea with pragmatic reality as well, right? So, you know, would we have loved to have been producing, you know, glossy hardback editions of our e-zine with QR codes where people could scan and do the music? We may do that in the future, by the way, right? But at the time, it was like, well, we could, but we've got limited capacity. And we have to be realistic with our own time and what we can achieve. Now, obviously, we live in the digital world as well. So I think having the advent of so many digital platforms out there makes that a lot easier and a lot more accessible for people and a lot easier to achieve. So I think my guidance on that is, you know, have the great idea, but try and then just distill it down to what are the most simplistic, critical elements that you'd need to keep that laser light focus on, right, to ensure it becomes reality, as opposed to, I've got so many things going on that this great idea is never going to come to fruition. Yeah. I think one of the other key things then is all about sort of like brand and brand identity. And again, our brand came from an idea session down at the pub. I've still got the photograph of the till receipt where we had it all scratched down on. But interestingly, I've got a very good friend of mine who actually works in Brighton for a brand design agency, works with very big international companies, produces stamps for the post office and all sorts. But he looked at it all and he said, can't actually offer you guys any improvements. You've done a cracking job with it. So again, we were delighted on that. If I'm honest, probably more luck than judgment, right, on that one. But I think that's the other key thing, is when you're trying to bring those ideas to fruition, what's the brand, what's going to make people want to stop and pay attention, and who's your real target audience for those ideas as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Harry's just asked a question as well. He says, thank you, Sean. What genre of literature do you expect to make waves or a breakthrough that hasn't done before now, or haven't done recently? Sorry,
that's all right.
My ability to read out loud just completely bad.
You've been on all day, Catherine. Looking at a screen all day is always going to do that to the eyes. So what genre? I mean, it's an interesting one, because we're not a genre publisher as such, right? We are literary fiction, and that will have its own sort of periods of interest and tailing off, and genre itself is quite interesting, because we're living in an age of blurred genre. Again, Caraline mentioned David Mitchell. Is that sci-fi? Is it fantasy? Is it literary fiction? Actually, it's all of them, right? That's rolled into Cloud Atlas, if anyone's ever read that. I'm only referencing that because Caraline mentioned it, right? But that's just a blurring of multiple genres, right? But it will be, I would class that as literary fiction because of the way that it's been constructed. We've all seen boom in the sort of crime fiction area, whether that was Scandinavian noir or Scottish noir, or you never know, we might get to the Sussex Downs noir variety that's going to be coming out. Who knows what that will hold. I think in terms of where it's going, there is probably a bit more of a boom at the moment in terms of more of the I don't know if it's a genre in its own right, actually, but more of the sort of normal people ilk, which is great narrative about human interactions and experiences of how those characters have grown and developed. But yeah, I'm not really a genre expert, I'm afraid, Harry. So and again, I think, as with any industry, Rue the person who always predicts what will be the next big thing, because as soon as you say it, you just know it won't be.
Yeah, fair. Harry's asked another question, actually. He said, does Amazon cause problems for independent book publishers, despite their contributions for publishing with the Kindle and everything? Does Amazon and those big companies cause issues?
Undoubtedly, yes, is the straightforward answer to that, but it's probably a little bit more complex and nuanced than all of that. I think as independent publishers, our ultimate emphasis is on developing really great relationships with independent bookshops, right? And this is certainly true of the literary fiction genre, right? Because a lot of that will come through word of mouth. A lot of it will come from independent bookshop owners who love literature saying, you must read this book, to their customers, right? And the customers do word of mouth, and they come in and they're literally almost hand selling copies of the book to their customers. So for us, we have, every time we bring out a new title, there are about 850 independent bookshops in the United Kingdom, not including those that deal in secondhand books only or different genre bookstores. It's about 850 that I'll be in contact with our own brochures, with our own email campaigns, and they're great. That they are the lifeblood of the independent publishing scene. So I'd say to everyone, please support your independent bookshop, right? So, and when people say, yeah, but it's cheaper on Amazon, isn't it, Sean? And the number of times I get that, and I say, well, hang on a minute, right? So I'm selling a book for £9.99, and while we're having this conversation, we're in the pub, and you've just bought 2 pints in this pub. How much did that cost? Right, and you're telling me that you can't afford to buy a book for £9.99, but you've just spent it on 2 pints of beer, and you'd rather go and buy it on Amazon for £6, right? So I think certainly, please, I appeal to everyone, support your independent bookshops for that process. Now, the other element of the question was about Kindle, etc. It all depends on the genre again, Harry. So for literary fiction, most buyers are actually after the physical product of the book, most, and that's across every demographic as well, by the way. Always prefer the physical book in that genre that we're operating in. and our sales figures would bear that out. I'd probably say only 5% of our sales, if that, come through ebooks, and the rest are all the physical format. Now that again will vary from genre to genre in terms of the reader's own preference of what type of book they're reading. They'll be happy to have it on the Kindle. Now I'm also, don't get me wrong, I don't mind about ebook or physical, because all I care about is people are reading, right? So I don't care what format that takes. And people used to decry the Kindle as this is the end of print publishing, and does it really matter? Probably not, because people are still reading, right? But Amazon has its pros as well. It gives people a wider reach. It does enable easy purchases of people, but at the same point, it's got inbuilt algorithms that are geared towards the bigger publishing houses as well, and that. So pros and cons, Harry. I hope that's answered your question.
I had wondered about that actually. I didn't know that independent bookshops and independent publishers work together so closely. I mean, it makes complete sense, but I hadn't seen that had occurred to me. But yes, yeah. I think everybody here is probably an advocate of independent bookshops. All lots of literature nerds here, so don't worry about that. Sophia, unless you've got any questions, I think that was a fantastic presentation. So thank you very much.
No, I don't.
Wow. Okay. Brilliant.
That's it. Yeah, I think you covered everything.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us, Sean. That was really brilliant. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I hope I answered the questions. And one thing I would say before going is, of course, check our website and go and buy our titles, guys. You'll love them. All of our authors. Great.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you, Sean. I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. Likewise. All the best. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that is everybody. We did it.
Yay!
Thank you so much for everybody who's come to watch, and for everybody who obviously helped to make this event happen. It's been fantastic to hear from everybody. This has been really good. But yes,
I want to thank the guests as well for coming. Thank you so much and everything. And they've given us so many good books to read as well now.
Yeah, we are actually going to have to put together a list, I think, of that was too many book recommendations to possibly write down. I guess I
was trying to write them all, but
I guess that's what you get for talking to 5 different publishers. I guess that's what do we expect? So thank you for everybody who's asked questions as well. That's been really brilliant. Okay, well, I would say we can.
Cool. And to remind everyone to look on the website and look at our presentations of creative projects and placements.
And we've also got an event evaluation form on the website as well, which would be amazing if people could fill out. What was that last bit?
Students, can you fill out your event evaluation forms as well, please?
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Wow. We did it. Okay. All right. Thank you, Sophia. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
I'd say we're done.
Cool.
Well done, everybody. All right. The end. Thank you for coming to Eyes of the Future 2021. Bye-bye.